They say love can tame even the darkest soul. But what happens when that soul belongs to the devil himself? She slapped the Mafia boss in his own club, and instead of killing her, he smiled. From that moment, two worlds collided: blood and fire, hate and desire. She was everything he could never have: pure, fearless, alive. And he was everything she should have run from: ruthless, powerful, and broken. But love doesn't follow rules. It burns them. Now, between bullets and betrayal, they'll fight not just enemies, but the darkness inside themselves. Because in this world, love isn't a fairy tale. It's survival. And when hearts beat in a world of guns, someone always bleeds. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to watch this video till the end, because this story will break your heart and heal it too. Chicago pulsed beneath the rain that night. Thunder rolling above the skyline, lights flickering across the wet streets like reflections of secrets too dark to speak. Inside Club Inferno, music pounded against velvet walls. Smoke curled through flashing neon as laughter and danger mixed in equal rhythm. The club belonged to one man, Dante Moretti. Elena Carter moved through the crowd, a tray balanced in her trembling hands. Her black uniform clung to her curves, her dark hair tied back, a few rebellious strands escaping near her cheeks. The air was heavy with perfume, sweat, and the sharp scent of whiskey. She hated this place, yet needed the job more than she wanted to admit. "Table 5 wants another bottle of Macallan," her manager barked. Elena nodded, her heels clicking softly as she weaved through the sea of strangers. Her mind already fogged by exhaustion, she didn't notice the man sitting in the shadowed VIP corner, a figure carved from mystery and danger. Dante Moretti sat like a king among thieves, his black shirt open at the throat, a silver chain glinting against his skin. A scar ran faintly along his jawline, a mark that only made him look more untouchable. People whispered his name with fear and fascination. He owned half the city, they said, and the rest feared him enough not to ask questions. Elena placed the bottle on the next table, her attention divided, her nerves already on edge. The music shifted, low, sultry. As a group of men in tailored suits entered the club, eyes scanning the crowd, the atmosphere changed instantly. She could feel it, the tension, the weight of power. Her tray wobbled slightly in her grasp. She turned, bumping into someone's shoulder. The glass on her tray tilted, and before she could react, crash. A wave of crimson liquid splashed across a black leather jacket. The world froze. Elena's heart stopped as she lifted her gaze. Dante Moretti stared down at her, droplets of red wine running down his sleeve, dripping onto the floor like blood. Her throat went dry. I'm so sorry, sir," she stammered, eyes wide. The music softened. Conversations halted. Every pair of eyes turned toward them. Dante didn't move. He simply looked at her, a calm, lethal quiet behind his gaze, the kind that made men confess their sins. Then, with deliberate slowness, he stood. "You do realize," his voice rolled low, smooth, dangerous, "this jacket costs more than your monthly paycheck?" A few of his men chuckled darkly nearby. Elena swallowed hard, her pulse loud in her ears. "I said I'm sorry," she whispered. Dante's eyes glimmered, sharp blue steel under the club lights. He stepped closer, his height shadowing her completely. "Do you know who I am?" Her lips parted, fear making her voice shake. "You're Dante Moretti." He smiled faintly, a predator's smile. "Good. Then you know what happens when people disrespect me in my own club." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. A bouncer shifted forward. Someone whispered, "He's gonna make her regret it." Elena's eyes burned. Something inside her snapped. Exhaustion, humiliation, anger at the unfairness of the world. She had swallowed fear for too long. Before she even realized what she was doing, her palm swung upward. Crack. the sound echoing like a gunshot across the floor. The club went silent. Every head turned. Every hand froze. Elena's breathing quickened, her hands still trembling mid-air. The imprint of her slap reddened across the Mafia boss's cheek. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Guns clicked. His men reached for their holsters, ready to strike. She flinched but didn't step back. Her voice, barely above a whisper, carried through the still air. "I said I'm sorry, but I won't let you treat me like dirt." The words hung between them, electric. Dante's jaw flexed, and then he laughed. A low, rich, impossible sound that sent chills crawling down every spine in the room. Slowly he raised a hand, signaling his men to stand down. His eyes, however, never left hers. There was curiosity there, amusement, and something far more dangerous, intrigue. He took a step closer until the space between them felt like fire waiting to spread. His voice softened, threading through the tension like velvet and smoke. "Finally?" he murmured, eyes fixed on her trembling lips. Someone with fire. Her pulse raced. She didn't understand why his tone, instead of fury, made her shiver. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "What's your name, waitress?" "Elena," she whispered. "Elena," he repeated, letting it roll off his tongue like a secret he wanted to keep. "I'll remember that." The crowd held its breath. Even the DJ hadn't dared restart the music. Dante straightened, brushing a spot of wine from his jacket, unbothered, his smirk still lingering. Every inch of him radiated control, yet his gaze betrayed something new, an interest that shouldn't exist between predator and prey. Elena stood frozen, her mind screaming to run, her feet refusing to move. For the first time in her life, she had defied power, and power had smiled back. The manager hurried over, face pale. "Mr. Moretti, sir, she didn't mean—" Dante lifted a hand, silencing him instantly. His voice came calm, laced with something unreadable. "Don't touch her." Everyone froze again. He turned, eyes burning into Elena's. "She's mine now." The crowd erupted in whispers as his men stepped aside, creating a path toward him. Elena's heart hammered in confusion and fear as Dante extended a hand, not for punishment but possession. Her world tilted, because in that single moment she realized her life would never belong to her again. The club had long gone silent after the storm. By morning, Chicago's streets shimmered beneath a pale sun, as if the night had been nothing but a dream. But Elena knew better. The memory of Dante Moretti's voice, "She's mine now," still echoed inside her like a curse. She hadn't slept. Not a minute. The image of his smirk, the way the crowd parted for him like the sea for a king, replayed in her mind. Now, standing outside the heavy wooden doors of his office, her hands were trembling again. Her manager had summoned her early, no explanation, just a glare, and the words, "He wants to see you." She swallowed hard, adjusting the hem of her simple black dress. The hall smelled faintly of smoke and expensive cologne. 2 guards flanked the door. Silent, unreadable. When one of them finally opened it, the world beyond looked nothing like she'd imagined. The office was dimly lit, filled with shadows and the soft hum of classical music. Large windows overlooked the city, the blinds half drawn. Shelves lined with books stood beside glass cases of rare cigars and old bottles of whiskey. And there, behind a polished mahogany desk, sat Dante Moretti. He wasn't in a suit this time. Black shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing ink that traced the veins of his forearms. A watch gleamed at his wrist, understated but expensive. He didn't look like a man waiting to punish. He looked like someone who'd already decided what came next. "Elena Carter," he said softly, his voice low, smooth as velvet but edged with steel. "Sit." She hesitated. The chair in front of his desk looked like a trap. Still, she obeyed. He studied her in silence for a long moment, fingers steepled under his chin. The air between them grew thick, heavy with tension and something unspoken. "You made quite a scene last night," he began finally. "Not many people walk out of this club after raising a hand to me." Her throat tightened. "I didn't mean to, it just—" He raised a hand, stopping her. "Don't apologize now. I've heard it enough. What I want to know is, why?" She frowned. "Why what?" "Why you did it." His gaze pinned her. "Why didn't you just cry or beg or run like everyone else does?" Her lips parted, but words failed. Because the truth was, she didn't even know herself. Something in her had rebelled against being treated like she was nothing. When she didn't answer, Dante leaned back in his chair, the faintest smile tugging at his mouth. "Maybe I was right," he murmured. "You do have fire." Elena's heart thudded painfully. "If you called me here to mock me, just say it and let me go." His eyes flickered, a spark of amusement, then calm again. "No, Miss Carter. I called you here to give you a choice." Her brows knit. "A choice?" "Yes." He rose from his chair, his height overwhelming the space between them. "You can walk out of here, leave this club, pretend last night never happened." Her chest lifted with hope until he added, "But you'll never work in this city again, not after disrespecting me in front of my men." Her hope shattered. She whispered, "So, what's the other option?" Dante stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of cedarwood and danger. "You work for me directly as my personal server for the next month." Her heart jumped. "You're... what?" "You heard me." His tone didn't rise, but it left no room for argument. "You'll serve me at private meetings, events, dinners. I'll make sure you're paid well. You'll be protected." Her eyes flashed. "Protected from what? You?" He smiled faintly, but there was sadness behind it. "From everyone else." The silence stretched. Elena's thoughts spiraled, fear, anger, disbelief. "And if I refuse?" Dante met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Then you'll learn why people don't cross the Moretti name." The room seemed to shrink. The world outside faded. Her palms grew damp. She was trapped. Not by force, but by circumstance. He was offering her survival at the cost of freedom. "I'll think about it," she whispered. Dante tilted his head, the faintest curve of a smirk touching his lips. "You have until sunset." He turned away, walking toward the window. The light caught the edge of his profile. Strong, chiseled, but shadowed by something weary. "You're dismissed, Miss Carter." Elena rose slowly, her chest tight. She wanted to curse him, to call him arrogant, cruel. But something about the way his shoulders lowered, the way he stared out at the city as if it were a cage instead of a kingdom, stopped her. "Why me?" she blurted suddenly. He didn't turn around. "Because you're not afraid of me." Her breath caught. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Not completely, because when she looked at him, fear wasn't the only thing she felt. She left his office with her heart pounding and confusion crawling through her veins. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Whispers followed her through the club, eyes tracking her every step. Some pitied her, others envied her. She didn't tell anyone about the offer. She couldn't. By evening, she sat in the tiny staff room, staring at her reflection in a cracked mirror. Her life had been simple once. Wait tables, pay rent, survive. But now everything had changed because of one mistake, one slap. She pressed her palms to her face, exhaling shakily. "What am I doing?" Outside, thunder rumbled again, the sky bruised and gray. It felt like the city itself was warning her. Still, as night fell, she found herself walking back toward his office, her steps slow, reluctant, yet certain. When she entered, Dante was there, leaning against his desk, reading a file. He looked up, meeting her gaze with that calm, knowing look. "I accept," she said quietly. He closed the file, his smirk subtle, almost relieved. "Good. I hate losing people who interest me." There it was again, that tone. Playful, teasing, but layered with something else she couldn't name. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against her arm. Not possessive, just deliberate. "Starting tomorrow, you'll report to me, every morning." Elena's voice shook. "And after a month?" "After a month," he said, eyes softening. "You'll walk away, if you still want to." His words lingered, and though they should have sounded like freedom, they didn't. That night, long after the club emptied and the neon lights dimmed, Elena found herself wandering through the hall that led to Dante's office. The door was open just slightly. Curiosity tugged at her, stronger than fear. She stepped inside quietly, the air smelling faintly of smoke and something old, danger and memories. Her gaze drifted across the room until it stopped on a wall she hadn't noticed before. It was covered in photos, faces of men, most crossed out with red ink, each photo marked with names, dates, and bloodlines. Her stomach tightened, and then her eyes froze on one particular picture. Dante Moretti, younger, sharper, but unmistakably him. Every other face had a red mark, except his. Elena's breath caught as she stepped closer, fingertips brushing the cold surface of the photo. Her heart pounded with a strange mix of fear and fascination. Behind her, the door creaked softly, and a voice, deep and familiar, whispered from the darkness. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Elena." The voice behind her froze the air in her lungs. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Elena." She turned sharply. Dante stood by the doorway, half-shadowed, eyes glinting in the dim light. For a second, she couldn't breathe. His presence filled the room like smoke. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. I didn't mean to intrude," she stammered. The door was open and... He walked closer, each step unhurried, deliberate. The door was never open by mistake. Her gaze flicked toward the wall again, to the photos, the faces marked out in red. "Who are they?" she whispered. Dante stopped behind her, his voice low. "People who made choices they couldn't live with." She shivered. Something in his tone wasn't threatening. It was hollow, filled with something colder than anger. Regret. "I told you curiosity can be dangerous," he repeated softly. "But I'll forgive this once. Only once." Elena nodded, her heart pounding. He turned away and the faint scent of smoke lingered as he spoke again, quieter now. "You start tomorrow. Be on time." And just like that, he was gone. The next morning came heavy with rain. The club was silent, but the office was alive with quiet activity. Dante's men came and went, carrying briefcases, whispering into phones. Elena moved among them, unnoticed but observant, serving coffee, tidying papers, listening. She wasn't sure what she had expected. Maybe a world of violence and chaos. But this was colder. It was business, ruthless, organized, precise. Dante didn't look up when she entered with his drink. He sat behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, voice calm but lethal. "No Marco, no loose ends. If he talks, he disappears. End of story." He hung up, exhaled, then looked at her as if the darkness hadn't touched him at all. "Black coffee. You remembered." Elena forced a small nod. "You don't seem like a man who forgets things." That earned her a faint smirk. "Not when they're worth remembering." She turned quickly, hiding the heat that rose to her cheeks. Days passed. Slowly, she began to understand how Dante's empire ran. Not through fear alone, but through loyalty. Men who would die for him, women who whispered his name like a prayer. Yet beneath it all, she saw something different, something broken. Once she found him outside the club, long after midnight. He wasn't surrounded by guards this time. He stood in the rain, hands in his pockets, staring across the street where a group of children played under a broken streetlight. He tossed a few folded bills to one of his men and said softly, "Make sure they eat tonight." Elena watched from the doorway, her chest tightening. A man who could order death with a whisper, yet worried if hungry children slept cold. Who was he really? She began to see more of him, not just the boss, but the man, the quiet moments between the chaos, the way he paused before signing a contract, as if every decision carried ghosts, the way his eyes darkened when someone mentioned betrayal. One morning, he asked her to bring files from the locked drawer in his office. When she did, she saw a photo tucked between the folders. A woman's smile, gentle and kind. His mother, she guessed. He caught her staring. "That was a long time ago," he said quietly, taking the photo. "You visit her?" "Every Sunday," he replied, not looking at her. "Rain or shine." There was a silence so fragile, even the ticking clock seemed afraid to break it. Then he looked up, his eyes softer. "You think I'm a monster, don't you?" Elena hesitated. "I think you've been hurt. Deeply." For the first time, he smiled. Not the smirk she'd come to expect, but a small, tired smile that looked like surrender. "You see too much, Elena. And you hide too much," she said quietly. He chuckled, low and rough, then turned away. But she noticed. That night, he didn't drink. He sat quietly, lost in thoughts he never shared. Over the following weeks, she learned the rhythm of his world, the coded messages, the late-night meetings, the glances exchanged between his men, and she learned that everything revolved around one thing: trust. Dante trusted no one, but with her, the walls began to crack. He started sharing pieces of his story, how someone he loved had betrayed him years ago, leaving him to bleed in the street while his empire burned. "How do you forgive something like that?" she asked one night. "You don't," he said simply. "You rebuild, stronger, colder." She wanted to tell him that forgiveness wasn't weakness, that it was freedom. But the look in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't ready to hear it. Yet the more she saw, the less she could hate him. She should have been afraid of his temper, his power, his world. But all she felt was a strange pull, a curiosity that wrapped around her heart like fire. Until the night everything changed. It was late. The club was nearly empty. Dante had been in his office for hours, door closed, men coming and going. Elena was supposed to leave, but she lingered, her instincts restless. When the last guard stepped away, she moved quietly toward the hall, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. The door to his office was slightly open. Voices drifted through, low, tense. "You can't start a war now," a man said. "Not with Lorenzo still controlling the docks. We'll lose half our shipments." Dante's voice was calm, steady, too steady. "Then we take them back, tonight, before sunrise." Elena froze. War. Her stomach turned cold. She pressed closer, the edge of the door against her fingers. Another voice, one of his lieutenants, spoke sharply. "What about the girl? The waitress? You've let her too close. People are talking." There was a pause. The silence stretched long enough for her pulse to hammer in her ears. Then Dante spoke again, his tone quiet, almost unreadable. "If she betrays me too, she dies next." The words hit her like a blade through glass. Her knees weakened. She stepped back, heart pounding, breath catching in her throat. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard, but the weight in his voice said otherwise. She pressed her back against the wall, the shadows swallowing her whole. Everything she thought she understood about him, the kindness, the confessions, the glimpses of humanity, shattered into pieces. The man behind the smile was still a monster in the dark. Elena turned to leave quietly, but her shoe brushed against a loose floorboard, a faint creak that sliced through the silence. Inside the office, chairs scraped. Then Dante's voice, sharper now, called out, "Who's there?" The silence after his words still haunted her. "If she betrays me too, she dies next." Elena barely slept that night. His voice replayed like a curse in her mind. Each syllable, cold and final, sliced through the fragile trust that had begun to grow between them. But beneath the threat, she had seen something else. Pain. A kind of sorrow no words could mask. The next evening, the club was quieter than usual. Shadows seemed longer, thicker, as if the walls themselves knew what was coming. Dante had ordered everyone out early, leaving only a handful of guards and a single dim light burning above his office door. Elena had stayed back, clearing glasses with trembling hands. That's when she heard it, a crash, sharp and violent, echoing through the hallway. Her heart jumped. Another crash followed, and then a shout. Dante's voice. Without thinking, she dropped the tray and ran. In the back corridor, she found him surrounded by chaos. Broken glass, overturned chairs, and blood. 2 masked men had cornered him. One raised a knife, the other reached for a gun. Elena's scream froze them for a split second, just long enough for Dante to strike. The fight was brutal. Fast. Dante's movements were a mix of rage and grace. But one of the men still managed to slash his arm before escaping into the night. When silence returned, Dante leaned against the wall, breathing hard, blood trailing down his sleeve. "Dante." Elena's voice broke as she reached him. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his skin was pale. "No, you're not." She grabbed his hand before he could pull away. "Sit down, please." He hesitated, not because he feared her touch, but because it disarmed him. He'd faced bullets, betrayal, and blood for years, but nothing had ever felt as dangerous as her hands trembling against his skin. She led him to the couch, her heartbeat racing louder than the storm outside. With a shaky breath, she tore a strip from her apron and pressed it gently against the wound. He flinched. "Hold still," she whispered. "You'll make it worse." He studied her in silence. No woman had ever spoken to him like that, not with fear, but with stubborn care. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock and the soft rhythm of her breath. She cleaned the wound with steady hands, but her eyes kept drifting up, to his jawline, his lashes, the faint bruise forming near his temple. "Why didn't you run?" he finally asked, voice low and rough. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "Because I couldn't." He gave a bitter smile. "You're either brave or foolish." "Maybe both," she murmured. He stared at her, really stared, as though trying to memorize her face in that dim light. His world had always been sharp edges and hard decisions, yet here was this girl, her fingers brushing his skin, soft and human, grounding him in a way he hadn't felt in years. When she was done, she leaned back slightly, her voice trembling. "You need stitches." He shook his head. "I've had worse." She frowned. "That's not the point." He smirked faintly. "You sound like someone who cares." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "Someone has to." Something shifted then. Something unspoken. His usual smirk softened into something she didn't recognize. His hand moved, slow and uncertain, brushing a stray lock of her hair behind her ear. She froze, not out of fear, but because the gesture was too gentle to belong to the man everyone called a monster. "Elena." He breathed her name like a confession. "Dante," she whispered back, unsure what she was asking for. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. "You make me forget who I am," he said, barely audible. The world seemed to fall away. The noise, the fear, the blood, all gone. There was only his heartbeat, strong and unsteady, echoing against her chest. For a second, time stopped. His forehead rested against hers, both of them caught in a fragile moment they didn't understand. Their eyes met, blue against steel gray, and everything unsaid lingered in the air between them. She didn't move when he drew closer. Her pulse trembled. His hand lingered near her jaw, fingers tracing the edge of her face like he was afraid she might vanish. And then, slowly, inevitably, their lips met, not with hunger, but with heartbreak. It was a kiss that shouldn't have happened. Gentle, trembling, full of all the things they couldn't say. It wasn't about power or passion. It was about loneliness finding warmth for the first time. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke. The silence between them was louder than any confession. His eyes searched hers, as if begging her not to ask what it meant. She didn't. She simply looked at him, tears glimmering under the dim light. Then the sound of heavy footsteps broke the spell. The office door burst open. One of Dante's men stumbled in, breathless, eyes wide with panic. "Boss," he gasped, "it's her brother. They've taken him." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena's heart stopped. Dante's jaw clenched, and for the first time fear flashed in his eyes. Not for himself, but for her. The air shattered with the words that froze Elena's soul. "Boss, it's her brother. They've taken him." For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. The world blurred, spinning around her as if someone had pulled the ground from beneath her feet. Her brother, Liam, her only family left. Her trembling lips parted, but no sound came. Dante's expression turned to stone, his smirk gone, replaced by a darkness even his men feared. Who took him? His voice was quiet, but it burned like ice. "The Maranzano crew," the guard stammered. "They sent a message, said it's payback." Elena's knees nearly gave out. She gripped the edge of Dante's desk to steady herself. Payback? For what? Dante's eyes flicked toward her, unreadable. "For me!" She shook her head, tears threatening to spill. No, this can't. They don't even know him." "They know you," he said flatly, "and they know you work for me. That's enough." His words sliced through her heart. She felt both rage and helplessness clawing inside her chest. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. He looked at her, that same look he had when he ordered a man's death, cold yet deliberate. "Whatever it takes." Dante turned to his men. "Get the cars ready. We move now." Elena grabbed his arm before he could walk away. "Wait, I'm coming." He frowned. "No, this isn't your world." She met his gaze, her voice trembling but fierce. "It is now." For a moment he just stared at her, as if searching for the girl who once spilled a drink in his club. She wasn't there anymore. In her place stood a woman, burning with fear and defiance. Finally he nodded once. "Then stay close. Don't make me regret this." The night outside was alive with thunder and rain. The convoy of black cars cut through the city like shadows hunting ghosts. Lightning flashed over Dante's face, revealing his jaw clenched tight, his eyes locked on the road ahead. Elena sat beside him in silence, her hands gripping the hem of her coat. "How do you know where they took him?" she asked quietly. Dante's voice was calm, too calm. "Because I know their pattern. They've done this before." Her throat tightened. "And those other people, did they survive?" He didn't answer. The silence said enough. When they reached the outskirts of Chicago, the rain had turned into a storm. Ahead, through the sheets of water, stood an old warehouse, its windows boarded, lights flickering through the cracks. The air smelled like oil, smoke, and danger. Dante's men stepped out, armed and wordless. He turned to her before opening his door. "You stay behind me. If things go wrong, you run." Her voice cracked. "And you?" He smirked faintly, a ghost of his old self. "I don't run." They moved like shadows through the storm, the sound of boots splashing through puddles, the faint click of guns. Everything felt surreal. When Dante raised his hand, the men froze. "Positions," he whispered. Within seconds, the warehouse was surrounded. Then, chaos. A door burst open. Bullets sliced through the night. The roar of gunfire drowned out the thunder. Dante's men retaliated, sharp and precise. Elena ducked behind a crate, heart racing so hard it hurt. Through the flashes of muzzle light, she saw him, Dante moving through the storm of bullets like a force of nature. His face was calm, deadly, his movements terrifyingly efficient. Each step was measured, each shot lethal. He wasn't the man who smiled at her. He wasn't even human in that moment. He was vengeance wrapped in flesh. And yet, every time someone aimed at her, he was there, pulling her out of danger, shielding her with his own body. "Elena, stay down," he barked, dragging her behind a stack of barrels as bullets struck the metal. The smell of gunpowder filled her lungs. I can't leave him in there," she cried. pointing toward a dimly lit room inside. Dante's eyes followed her gesture. "Then we get him out." They waited for the gunfire to pause, then rushed forward. Inside, where they took him? She asked quietly. Dante's voice was calm, too calm. "Because I know their pattern. They've done this before." Her throat tightened. "And those other people, did they survive?" He didn't answer. The silence said enough. When they reached the outskirts of Chicago, the rain had turned into a storm. Ahead, through the sheets of water, stood an old warehouse, its windows boarded, lights flickering through the cracks. The air smelled like oil, smoke, and danger. Dante's men stepped out, armed and wordless. He turned to her before opening his door. "You stay behind me. If things go wrong, you run." Her voice cracked. "And you?" He smirked faintly, a ghost of his old self. "I don't run." They moved like shadows through the storm, the sound of boots splashing through puddles, the faint click of guns. Everything felt surreal. When Dante raised his hand, the men froze. "Positions," he whispered. Within seconds, the warehouse was surrounded. Then, chaos. A door burst open. Bullets sliced through the night. The roar of gunfire drowned out the thunder. Dante's men retaliated, sharp and precise. Elena ducked behind a crate, heart racing so hard it hurt. Through the flashes of muzzle light, she saw him, Dante, moving through the storm of bullets like a force of nature. His face was calm, deadly, his movements terrifyingly efficient. Each step was measured, each shot lethal. He wasn't the man who smiled at her. He wasn't even human in that moment. He was vengeance wrapped in flesh. And yet every time someone aimed at her, he was there, pulling her out of danger, shielding her with his own body. "Elena, stay down!" he barked, dragging her behind a stack of barrels as bullets struck the metal. The smell of gunpowder filled her lungs. I can't leave him in there," she cried, pointing toward a dimly lit room inside. Dante's eyes followed her gesture. "Then we get him out." They waited for the gunfire to pause, then rushed forward. Inside, the air was heavy with smoke. She called out her brother's name. "Liam, where are you?" A faint groan answered. She ran toward it, finding him tied to a chair, bloodied but alive. Relief flooded her chest as she fell to her knees, working to untie the ropes. "Liam, it's me. You're okay." He winced. "Elena, what are you doing here? You shouldn't—" "Shh, it's fine. Dante's here." At that, Liam's eyes widened in fear. "Dante Moretti. Elena, no." But before he could finish, a shot rang out. Dante spun around, firing back at a man emerging from the shadows. The attacker fell instantly, but another replaced him. The warehouse erupted again into chaos. Liam tried to stand. Elena held him close, covering him as bullets ricocheted around them. Dante, bleeding from his shoulder now, took down the last two gunmen with precision. Then silence, only rain tapping the roof and the echo of their breaths. "It's over," Dante muttered. Elena's body trembled as she hugged her brother. "You're safe now." Dante knelt beside them, breathing hard. "We have to go. More could be coming." He helped Liam to his feet, supporting most of his weight as they made their way outside. The storm had lessened, the night strangely calm after the violence. Elena looked at Dante. The man covered in blood, both his and others, his shirt torn, face bruised, yet still standing tall. "You could have died," she whispered. He shrugged lightly. "Wouldn't be the first time." "Why would you risk your life for him?" she asked. "Because you asked me to." Her heart twisted at the simplicity of his words. They reached the car. Liam collapsed in the back seat while Dante leaned against the door, catching his breath. Elena's hands trembled as she wiped blood from his cheek. "You shouldn't have to live like this," she said softly. He looked at her, eyes shadowed. "We don't get to choose the lives we're given, Elena, only how we survive them." She opened her mouth to reply, but something caught her eye. On one of the fallen men near the car, the sleeve of his jacket had rolled up. There, on his forearm, was a tattoo, a black symbol shaped like a serpent curling around a dagger. Her breath hitched. She had seen that symbol before, on Dante's mother's ring, the one he wore on a chain beneath his shirt. She crouched down, her voice barely a whisper. "Dante, why would your mother's ring have this symbol?" Dante froze. For the first time since she'd met him, his face lost all color. He stared at the tattoo, and the storm outside seemed to rise again, echoing the storm now raging in his eyes. The rain still fell in hesitant drops, whispering against the roof of the car. Dante didn't move. His eyes were locked on the tattooed arm of the dead man, as if the ink itself had reached into his chest and dragged out a ghost he'd buried long ago. Elena watched him, her breath shallow. "Dante," she said softly, "what does it mean?" He didn't answer. He only stared, unblinking, unbreathing, before straightening abruptly. His jaw set. "Get in the car." "Not until you tell me what that symbol is," she insisted. "Now's not the time." His tone was sharp, a command wrapped in exhaustion, but she didn't move. "It's the same mark on your mother's ring. Don't tell me it's a coincidence." Something in her voice broke through his armor. He turned to face her, and the rain caught in the lines of his face. The same face that had smiled at her just nights ago, now shadowed by ghosts. "Get in the car, Elena," he said again, quieter this time. "I'll tell you everything when we're safe." The drive back was silent. Liam drifted in and out of consciousness in the back seat, while Dante's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles whitened. The wipers dragged across the windshield in a slow rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, trying to keep up. When they reached his mansion, the world was still asleep. No guards at the gate, no voices in the halls. Dante sent everyone away. Only the sound of thunder and their footsteps filled the emptiness. He guided Liam upstairs to a guest room, ordering a doctor with a single call. Then, without a word, he motioned for Elena to follow him to his office. She hesitated at the door but obeyed. Inside, the room felt colder than usual. Darker. The fireplace was dead, the shelves lined with secrets. Dante stood by the window, his reflection flickering in the glass. "You want to know about that mark?" he asked at last. Elena crossed her arms. "Yes, you promised." He turned to her slowly. "That symbol," he began, voice low, "belonged to a group inside my father's syndicate. They called themselves the Serpents." She frowned. "And your mother's ring?" He exhaled. "It was hers. She wore it because she thought it meant protection. Family. She didn't know it marked her death." Elena's chest tightened. What happened to her? Dante's eyes darkened. "She was killed by my own men." The words struck like a blade. He didn't look at her as he continued, his voice distant, raw. "I was 20 when it happened. She'd found out something about the money, the weapons, the trafficking routes. She threatened to go to the police. My father ordered her silenced." Elena's heart ached at the quiet tremor in his tone. "You mean," she whispered, "your father ordered her death?" He nodded once, barely. "I didn't find out until years later. By then, he was already gone. But his mark remained. On them, on the ones who betrayed her. So I did what I had to." She swallowed. "You hunted them, one by one," he said, "until I had no one left I could trust." The room fell silent. The rain outside softened into a distant hum, a sad song against the glass. Elena wanted to hate him for what he'd become, but in that moment all she saw was a boy who had lost everything and rebuilt himself from ashes and rage. She stepped closer. "Dante, you don't have to keep fighting ghosts." He looked up, meeting her gaze. "They're not ghosts until every one of them is gone." There was pain in his eyes, but something else too. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. He didn't say it, yet she could feel it in the air between them. For a moment, neither spoke. The distance between them was small, but it felt like a lifetime. Finally, she whispered, "Is that why you took me in? Because I reminded you of her?" Dante's jaw tightened. "Don't." "Then why?" she pressed. "Why me?" His voice was barely a murmur. "Because you made me forget what revenge felt like." The confession hung between them, fragile as smoke. She wanted to believe him, God, she wanted to, but something inside her twisted. A quiet unease she couldn't shake. His words were too perfect, too careful. When he left the room to check on Liam, she stayed behind, eyes scanning the walls, the shelves, the desk. Curiosity whispered louder than reason. On his desk lay a folder half buried beneath scattered papers. Her gaze caught on a name printed in bold letters. Her breath stopped. Liam Carter. Her heart pounded. Slowly, she pulled the file closer. Inside were photos, surveillance notes, background checks. Her brother's entire life spread across pages. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through them. Why would Dante have this? Was it protection or control? Her eyes widened when she found a final page, a document stamped with the Moretti crest. It mentioned a deal, a debt, and a name she didn't recognize. Behind her, the door creaked open. Elena. His voice was no longer soft. It was cold, the voice of the man everyone feared. She turned slowly, the file still in her hands. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, they burned with betrayal. "I can explain," she started, her voice cracking. He took a slow step toward her. "You went through my files. I had to know. You had no right." He stopped in front of her, his shadow stretching across the desk between them. For a moment, she saw not the man who had bled for her, but the ruthless boss whose name ruled the streets. "Dante, please," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to—" He cut her off, his voice low, shaking with restrained fury. "You just made the worst mistake of your life, Elena." The file slipped from her hands and hit the floor. The air between them turned sharp, suffocating, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never seen before. Not anger, but heartbreak. The sound of the file hitting the floor seemed louder than thunder. Papers scattered like wounded birds, photos of Liam sliding across the polished wood until one stopped at Dante's feet. He didn't move, didn't blink. Only his breathing betrayed him. Steady at first, then shallow, unsteady, sharp. Elena stood frozen, every muscle in her body screaming to run, but her heart wouldn't let her. "Dante," she whispered. He didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the papers. The evidence of her disobedience, her curiosity, her fear. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" he finally said, voice low, dangerous. "You think I haven't seen that look before? The one that doubts everything I say?" Her eyes glistened with tears. "I wasn't doubting you. I just needed to understand." "Understand what?" he snapped, stepping closer. "How much of your life I've risked to keep you breathing?" She flinched but didn't step back. "Then tell me the truth, Dante. Why do you have files on my brother? Why do you have records on everything? Every move he's made? Every debt he's paid?" He exhaled sharply, jaw clenched. "Because he was involved in something he shouldn't have been." Her lips parted in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Dante's voice softened for a moment, but it carried weight. "Liam wasn't taken by accident, Elena. He owed them money, a lot of it. He gambled with the wrong people, men who wanted him dead." She shook her head furiously. "That's not true. My brother isn't—" "He was," Dante interrupted, "until I intervened." The silence that followed felt like it could split the world. He walked around the desk, his footsteps slow, deliberate. "I paid off his debt. I kept him alive, but I knew it would come back to haunt me, to haunt you." Her heart pounded. The room felt smaller, tighter. "You should have told me." He looked at her, eyes dark with exhaustion. "And say what? That your brother nearly got you both killed? That the only reason you're standing here is because I bought his mistake?" Her voice trembled. "You made me believe he was innocent." Dante's tone cracked with restrained anger. "Because I was trying to protect you from a truth that would destroy you." Tears burned her eyes, her throat thick with betrayal. "You lied to me, Dante. You kept everything hidden." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You don't understand what lies keep this world from collapsing. I don't get to tell the truth, not if I want to survive." She took a step closer. "Then what am I to you? Another secret to protect, or another weakness you regret?" His eyes lifted to hers, filled with something raw, painful. "You're the only thing that ever made me wish I could be honest." The words should have broken her, but instead they made her heart ache even more, because she wanted to believe him. She wanted to run into his arms, to feel that safety again. But every word that came from his lips carried blood. Elena swallowed hard, voice barely audible. "You can't keep loving me while hiding half your soul, Dante." He took a slow step toward her, then another. "And you can't keep digging where the truth will bury you." They stood close now, inches apart. The rain outside turned fierce again, hammering the windows like it was trying to drown the storm inside. Dante's hand hovered near her cheek, trembling slightly. "I would burn the world for you," he whispered, "but don't make me prove it." Her tears finally fell. "You already have." For a moment, neither moved. Only the echo of their breathing filled the room. Then Dante turned away, fists tightening. "You shouldn't have looked in that file." "I had to," she said softly, "because I can't love a man I don't trust." He froze at that. The air between them cracked like lightning. Slowly he turned, eyes heavy with something close to heartbreak. "And I can't trust the woman who doesn't listen." The words hit her harder than any bullet could. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her heart breaking in silent screams she couldn't voice. She wanted to tell him that love wasn't obedience, that she'd only wanted to understand him. But his walls had risen again, higher, colder. He walked past her to the door, stopping only for a moment. "From now on, you stay here. You don't touch anything. You don't ask questions." Her voice cracked. "And what if I refuse?" He turned his head slightly, his tone flat. "Then you'll see a side of me I've been trying to hide from you." She stepped back, trembling. "Who are you really, Dante?" His eyes darkened, shadows swallowing whatever softness remained. "The man you shouldn't have fallen for." The door slammed behind him, leaving her in a silence that screamed. She sank to the floor beside the fallen papers, tears dripping onto Liam's photo. Her hand shook as she traced the corner of a document, one she hadn't noticed before. It was half burned, the edges singed, but the name printed on it stopped her breath. A signature at the bottom. It wasn't Dante's, it was her brother's. And beneath it, a line that read, "Confidential agreement." The serpents. Her mind spun. Liam? With them? No, it couldn't be. Her heart pounded in her ears as she gathered the papers, her breath quick and shallow. Everything she'd known began to fracture. Maybe Dante hadn't been lying. Maybe he'd been protecting her from something even darker. Or maybe both men she loved had been playing her all along. The truth twisted in her chest like a knife. Outside, thunder roared, a sound like war on the horizon. She rose to her feet, tears and fury tangled in her voice. "What have you done, Liam?" she whispered. "What did you get us into?" The door suddenly creaked open behind her. She turned sharply, heart hammering, expecting Dante, but instead a deep voice she hadn't heard in days echoed through the shadows. "Elena, we need to talk," Liam said, stepping out of the dark. Alive, and not as innocent as he looked. The steady beeping of the monitor erupted into chaos. The sound tore through the sterile air like an alarm for war. Dante froze. His father's cold eyes glimmered with satisfaction. the reflection of the red blinking light dancing across his face. "Step away from her," Dante said, his voice trembling beneath fury. His father tilted his head slightly, amused. "Why? She's already halfway gone." Dante's chest rose and fell, the weight of his pistol firm in his hand. The sterile smell of the hospital was now poisoned by gun oil and rage. Elena's faint voice broke through the tension. "Please, don't." For a moment, everything stilled. The thunderstorm outside, the trembling air, the pulse of 1,000 unspoken truths. Then Dante's father smirked. "Do you really think you can save her by pointing that gun at me?" Dante took a step forward, his finger hovering near the trigger. "You killed my mother. You destroyed everything I ever loved." His father's calm never wavered. "I made you what you are." The words hit like knives. Dante's knuckles whitened around the grip. "You made me a monster." His father nodded slowly. "Exactly. And now you want to throw it all away for her?" His gaze flicked toward Elena. "A waitress, a pretty distraction. The same kind of woman who made your mother weak." Dante's hand trembled, the gun lowering slightly as pain crossed his face. "Don't you dare speak her name." His father leaned closer, voice cutting like broken glass. "Why not? She betrayed me. She was going to run away, with you. That's why she had to die." The words shattered Dante's last thread of restraint. He lunged forward, slamming his father against the wall. The gun clattered to the floor. "Liar!" Dante roared, his fist crashing into his father's face. Blood splattered across the tile, sharp and red against white. Elena cried out from the bed. "Dante, stop! You'll kill him!" Her voice cracked something deep inside him. His grip loosened for just a second, and that second cost him. His father struck back hard, twisting Dante's arm and shoving him into the glass cabinet. The sound of shattering glass filled the room, raining shards like glittering knives. Dante gasped, pain slicing through his shoulder, but his rage burned hotter. "You took everything from me," he shouted, grabbing a shard and slashing at his father's arm. Blood spilled, but the older man only smiled through the pain. "Everything I took made you stronger." Elena tried to pull herself up, her voice desperate. "You're killing each other." Her words barely reached them. The room pulsed with violence, decades of hate spilling into every punch, every breath. Dante's father swung again, his strength surprising for his age. Dante blocked it, his fist slamming into his ribs, sending the older man sprawling. Breathing hard, Dante stepped back, his vision blurring from exhaustion and grief. "This ends tonight," he said through clenched teeth. His father laughed, a low, chilling sound. "You still don't see, do you?" Dante's eyes narrowed. "See what?" "That girl's brother," the man said, smirking as he wiped blood from his mouth. "He wasn't kidnapped. He was working for me." The world tilted. Elena's face went pale. "What?" she whispered. Dante turned slowly toward her, disbelief hardening into horror. "He's lying." His father chuckled. "Ask him yourself. Liam was my inside man. He gave me everything I needed, your locations, your weaknesses, your shipments." Elena's tears spilled down her cheeks. "No, he wouldn't." "He did," his father said coldly, "because I promised him you'd be safe." Her heart cracked. Her brother, her own blood, part of the man who destroyed everything. Dante's mind spun. All those nights of suspicion, the files, the warnings, they weren't paranoia. They were truth. He looked at Elena, his voice breaking. "You knew nothing?" She shook her head, sobbing. "I swear I didn't know. I would have never." "I believe you," he whispered hoarsely. His father sneered. "Believing her will be your undoing." He lunged for the gun lying on the floor. Dante dove after him. The weapon skidded beneath the bed. Both men hit the ground, grappling, rolling through broken glass and blood. The struggle was primal. Breath against breath, hate against hate. Elena screamed, trying to get out of bed, her body weak, trembling. She reached toward the fallen gun, her fingers brushing the cold metal. "Stop!" she cried. "Please stop!" Neither listened. Dante's father pressed his knee into his son's chest, snarling. "You're not strong enough to end me." Dante's hand shot up, shoving his father back with desperate force. "Watch me." He reached for the gun, but so did his father. Their hands collided, both gripping the trigger, both fighting for control. Elena's heart monitor shrieked again, matching the rhythm of her scream. "Dante!" And then the deafening sound of a gunshot. Time froze. The smell of smoke filled the room. Dante blinked, his ears ringing, his breath ragged. His father's eyes widened, but not in pain. He looked down, no blood. Then Dante turned and saw Elena, her face pale, her hand clutching her chest where crimson bloomed through the hospital gown. Her lips trembled, eyes glassy with shock. "Dante," she whispered weakly. He caught her before she fell back against the bed, his world collapsing in one heartbeat. "No, no, no, stay with me." His voice shattered, hands pressing over the wound. "Elena, look at me." Her gaze was fading. "I told you, don't become like him." And then her eyes rolled back, her body going limp in his arms. Dante's scream tore through the walls, raw, animal, broken. His father stood frozen, disbelief etched into his face. For the first time, the old man looked human, shaken, afraid. The gun dropped from his hand, clattering against the tile. Dante turned toward him, his eyes red, voice low and trembling. "You did this!" His father took a step back, his arrogance cracking. It wasn't supposed to." Dante rose slowly, blood dripping from his fingers. "You took my mother, and now her." He picked up the gun from the floor, his hand steady despite the storm inside him. "This ends now." Cliffhanger. The camera lingers, Dante's finger tightening on the trigger, his father frozen in fear. But as the shot rings out, the bullet doesn't hit his father. It hits the doorway, where someone else had just walked in. And Dante's face twists in horror as Liam collapses to the floor. The sound of the gunshot still echoed through Dante's soul long after the smoke had cleared. The hospital room smelled of gunpowder and pain. Blood painted the walls of his past. Elena's fragile breath trembled under the fluorescent light. He stood frozen, staring at her still body, not knowing if she would ever open her eyes again. The body of his father lay motionless on the cold marble floor, eyes wide open, still burning with rage even in death. The man who had taught him power had died in the same fire he had started, and Dante was finally free, but empty. Days bled into nights. The empire collapsed like ash between his fingers. Men who once bowed to him now fled like rats from a sinking ship. The mansion was raided, his accounts frozen, his reputation shattered. None of it mattered. All he wanted was for her to live. He spent nights sitting by her bedside, the heart monitor beeping like a cruel clock, reminding him how close she stood to the edge. He whispered stories to her, words he had never said out loud, about his mother, about the nights he cried in silence as a boy, about the way she, this stubborn, brave waitress, had changed him without even trying. He held her hand like a prayer, afraid she'd fade if he let go. And every time her fingers twitched, hope sparked in him like a dying flame fighting to live. One night, when the world outside was quiet, she finally stirred. Her lashes fluttered like soft wings, and her voice came out weak but alive. "Dante?" He froze, his breath catching in his chest. "Elena," he whispered, his eyes glistening. "You're here. You came back to me." She smiled faintly, pain shadowing her beauty. You didn't give up on me." "I couldn't," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're the only thing that's ever made me want to live right." Tears rolled down her cheeks, silent and warm. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. "No more blood," she whispered. "Promise me, Dante." His voice broke as he said, "I promise." Weeks passed. The doctors called her recovery a miracle, but Dante knew it wasn't a miracle. It was redemption wearing her name. He sold everything, the cars, the mansion, the guns, even the rings that symbolized his empire. He walked away from it all, from the shadows that had fed on him for too long. Months later, the countryside embraced him with peace he'd never known. He rebuilt himself one brick at a time, opening a small bar by the lake, the same place where he had first met Elena. The walls smelled of cedar and rain. Every corner carried laughter instead of gunfire. He spent his mornings wiping tables, pouring coffee for strangers, and breathing in a life that finally felt clean. But some nights, when the moonlight spilled across the wooden floor, he'd hear her voice echoing in his memory. That soft laugh, the sound of her footsteps rushing behind the counter. He missed her fiercely, but he let her go, not knowing if she'd ever come back, until one evening, she did. The bell above the door chimed, and when he turned, the world stopped. Elena stood there, the sunset painting gold in her black hair, her blue eyes brighter than ever. She looked stronger, calmer, but still carried that spark that used to set his world on fire. For a second, they just stared at each other. Two souls who had been to hell and walked out holding scars instead of chains. He smiled first, a small, tender smile that trembled on his lips. "You found me," he said softly. "I always would," she whispered, her eyes shining. "You think I'd let you make coffee without me?" He laughed, a real laugh, one that carried warmth instead of pain. He walked around the counter, wiping his hands on a towel, heart racing like a storm beneath his ribs. When he stood before her, he saw the healed wound above her heart, the place where death once tried to steal her. He touched it gently, his voice trembling. "You survived because you're stronger than all of us." She smiled through tears. "No, I survived because you believed I could." He reached out, fingers brushing hers. Their palms met, and in that touch, everything they'd lost, every tear, every scar, finally found meaning. He leaned closer, his voice hushed, rough, full of longing. "You slapped me once," he murmured, smiling through tears. "Now I thank you for waking me up." Her laugh broke softly against his chest. "And you, Dante Moretti, learned to live." He pulled her into his arms, the world outside fading into nothing. Their lips met, not desperate like before, but slow, sure, full of peace. It wasn't a kiss of danger anymore. It was forgiveness, stitched with love. The neon light from the bar sign flickered against their faces. Red, gold, soft. It bathed them like dawn after a long night. He whispered against her lips, "You're my home now." She closed her eyes, leaning into his chest, breathing in the scent of rain and redemption. For the first time, silence wasn't heavy. It was beautiful. They stayed like that for a long time, two broken souls finally whole again. Outside, the wind carried the sound of crickets and distant laughter. Life was simple. Life was theirs, but peace has a cruel sense of timing. As they stood under the neon lights, a pair of headlights cut through the darkness outside the window. A black car slowed to a stop. Its engine purred like a predator, waiting. Inside, a hand rested on the steering wheel, tattooed with a symbol Dante thought had died with his father. The same mark, the same bloodline. Dante froze, his eyes narrowing as he saw it through the glass. Elena noticed his grip tighten around her hand. "What is it?" she whispered. His gaze hardened, a storm brewing behind his calm smile. "The past," he murmured, voice low. "It just found us." The headlight stayed still, burning against the glass. A faint silhouette in the car lit a cigarette, the flame reflecting off a familiar face, and from the shadows, a voice whispered through the wind. "Did you really think it was over, son?